All right, sorry about that. We got disconnected halfway through, but here we go. I'm going to continue, and then we're going to go ahead and break it down.
The Henrys wish Frey had not used lethal force so quickly.
You could use a broom, you can use a hose of water. He had a lead on it, and if I had, probably 5 more minutes, I could have had him on the lead.
I said, why did you do that? He said, well, he went for me. I said, no, he didn't. He was running away from me.
But I called Frey. I spoke with Nick Frey's attorney.
Why didn't he just grab the leash?
I think you're asking for a superhuman effort there. The dog viciously and ferociously lunged at him in a
Viciously,
split second.
ferociously.
Allison Barry Wilkinson tells me Frey gave his neighbors the chance to try and capture as well as control the dog. The attorney has worked with police practices expert Jeff Martin, who analyzed the video and claims it shows the dog charging Sergeant Frey.
If the dog is now moving towards you, is charging after you, after it's broken free from its owner, and after the dog is shot, falls pretty much at your feet, what's the logical inference to draw from that?
But the Henry family lawyer disputes that, pointing to the same video. Anna has Huck on the leash heading back home. He turns and takes off in this direction after another chicken. Sergeant Frey moves to the right out of the way, takes his shooting stance, opens fire. It appears the dog goes down here. Frey then takes 7 steps ending to the right of Huck. The Henry's attorney says that shows the dog was a significant distance from the sergeant and did not fall at Frey's feet when shot.
So it's pretty comical that he's now deciding to argue that he was acting in self-defense, because that's a little hard to do when the dog's running away from you.
With Huck bleeding on the ground and unable to move, Anna Henry and Frey's wife asks the sergeant to put the dog out of its misery.
Jenny, his wife, said, Nick, you have to help him. And I said, please, Nick, because I wanted the dog euthanized. And he said, I'm not touching that dog.
The dog was no longer a threat. He's not justified in just shooting a dog for the sake of shooting a dog.
Barry Wilkinson says he could not legally euthanize the dog. And that in any event, Frey thought the dog had died shortly after the shooting. The Henrys believed Huck was near death, so they waited with him in the rain. An hour later, he was still alive, so they loaded him into the SUV with their daughter.
And I climbed in the back with him because I didn't want him to die alone, like in the back of the car.
She texted this picture to a friend who asked what was happening. Brianna Henry didn't know she had Huck's blood on her face. He later had him euthanized. I tracked down the veterinarian who treated Huck that day, and she told me the bullets hit the dog from behind, in her opinion.
So there was one in the right back of his right shoulder, one right in the back, the top of the head.
Dr. Heather Burns shared Huck's x-rays with me showing the shrapnel.
If a dog is lunging at you and you're firing at the dog, wounds are going to be
100%.
Based at least in part on Sergeant Frey's statement that he felt threatened by the dog and did what he felt necessary to protect himself, Sonoma County Animal Control closed the case, adding that state agricultural code allows a dog to be killed if it's chasing livestock or poultry. But this nationally recognized police use of force expert, who has testified in more than 1,300 cases, has a different opinion.
And I'm speaking at the level of a trained police officer. Can't shoot to protect chickens. End of story.
Roger Clark,
End of
surprised
story.
that the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and the Novato Police, where Frey works, did not do their own investigations, relying instead on the Animal Control report. He questions why Frey would open fire toward an active roadway. A truck passes by just seconds after the last gunshot.
He's in a front yard. I don't know how the barrel was pointed, but if there was anywhere in the general vicinity of that car, it could ricochet and hit somebody in the car.
Finally, there's the issue of this skeleton the Frey family put up 1 week later, near the spot where Huck died. The Henrys tell me it added to the pain and loss they already felt. Frey's attorney said it was just a Halloween decoration they had used before.
It was the same decoration they did last year. Was it thoughtless and unthinking? Yes. But was it intended to cause them emotional distress and harm? Absolutely not.
I'd like for him to feel some pain I mean, I'll never forget that day ever. And I like him to be accountable. Somehow I like accountability.
While the dog was friendly to the Henry family and their grandkids, I spoke to one neighbor who was afraid of Buck because the dog would bark when he walked by. A difficult story, but you can understand that how both families have been affected by this.
So the dog owners here, their only mistake, their only negligence in this situation is, which is a big one, which cost them the life of their dog, is not keeping your dog under control on a leash at all times, or not having a boundary in their property, fence line, some kind of enclosure, even the invisible fence. You don't want to have your dog tethered on a trolley system in a kennel. People who don't believe in that, whatever. But here's the thing: when your dog is loose and goes onto your neighbor's property, you're in the wrong. You're in the wrong. So, but does that mean that you need to die or your animal needs to die? No, absolutely not. That's like, what kind of world are we living in, man? This guy, first of all, he's a coward. You know, he's a coward, man. You're a coward, bro. You're a coward. If you ever see this, you're a coward, man. I don't know how you got that job, but you definitely hide behind it. You definitely are nothing without your weapon and have no consideration for the life of your kids, other kids, and civilians and citizens. You're an egotistic coward, man. Pull a gun. What kind of man? I was raised, you do not pull out a gun unless you're going to use it. Bottom line, period. Weapons, rifles are for hunting, and only hunting food that you're going to eat. You hunt and kill an animal for no reason. I don't agree with that either. Unless you're depopulating, or he's sick and injured, or it's a threat to a human. Wild animals, not domestic. I want to go back to this again, though. Let's see, I don't know if anybody has comments or. Let's see. We're gonna go back. We're gonna break it down. I'm gonna discuss here.
Caught on video, the head of the Nevada police SWAT team shoots his neighbor's dog as its elderly owners pick on. Good evening, I'm Anna Gates.
I'm Dan, actually. Thanks for joining us. This is a disturbing case, obviously. The dog had killed 2 chickens.
But a police use of force expert says the officer should not have opened fire.
ABC 7 News IT reporter Dan Norris is here with a story you will see only on 7.
Well, Dan and Amma, the shooter is no ordinary officer. He is head of the Nevada SWAT team, master of the police gun range, and they're expert in de-escalation.
All right, so this guy is not only just, excuse me, not only is he just a law enforcement officer, but he is the expert, the de-escalation guy. Let's see, let's listen to that one more time.
IT reporter Dan Norris is here with a story you will see only on 7.
Well, Dan and Amma, the shooter is no ordinary officer. He is head of the Nevada SWAT team, master of the police gun range.
Head of the SWAT team, master of the gun range. That means that's his place right there. You know what I mean? He controls what happens there. So I'm assuming that means that makes him an expert, right? You're not called a master for nothing.
And they're expert in de-escalation. One note.
Expert in de-escalation, which he couldn't even de-escalate the situation with his neighbor. He couldn't come to some kind of agreement. And to top it off, at the end of the video, truly, I believe the only reason he shot the dog, because his wife told him to. His wife said, shoot the dog. And then she says, shoot the SOB. So we'll start with that. My opinion is that if you are off duty, if you work in a job where you carry a weapon, besides very few exceptions, very few positions, you shouldn't carry it off duty. For what? The average citizen in that situation wouldn't have had a gun, wouldn't have pulled a gun out. I'm going to bring up another situation. I was, and I'll slowly educate my audience as I do my videos, but I was an animal control officer for the city of Chula Vista for almost 10 years. And I can tell you countless stories. Other officers can tell you countless stories of how dogs were killed by off-duty law enforcement officers who were afraid. And the first thing they do was draw their weapon, shoot without even thinking in residential areas with no consequence. And even in the situation I'm speaking of, it was in East Lake, Chula Vista. It was a BP agent. He came home, and I don't remember if he was coming in or out of his garage or in out of his car, but basically he got out of his car in his driveway, and there was a blue pit, wagging his tail, super friendly. He pulled out his gun and shot it. They brought it, the owners brought it to the shelter, tried to save her life, and fortunately, she died. They couldn't save her. The bullet did its damage, and he felt really bad. But again, why so paranoid? It'd be nice to have the opinion of some officers, but I'll tell you mine. I think it's the training. At least from my experience, the officers are trained to be paranoid, to be scared, to operate as if they're, about to die. Now, there's a little bit of, you need to be aware. You need to definitely make sure you make it home, but not at the expense of recklessly killing people or animals or injuring them by immediately drawing to your weapon. It's just ridiculous. Like I said in the beginning, to me, it's cowardice. How are you the head of de-escalation, and the first thing you do is go to a gun? And then I already know you're a sucker. You're a beta because you got your wife telling you what to do. You got your wife instigating this issue. And not only that, there's little kids right there, man. What is your problem? That makes you the biggest coward right there. You got little kids right here in the scene, and you're opening you're opening the weapon. You can't go handle a dog. It's another thing, man. I could sit here for hours and talk about how many officers I know, deputies, officers, whatever you want to call them, people that work in law enforcement, people that work in the field that are terrified of dogs. You should not be doing the job. Dogs are out in the world, It's to me, it's like when a racist person joins the force. They're gonna treat you treat something that you do not like or are afraid of in a very distinct way. So that should definitely not be a fear that you have if you're dealing with the public. And I dealt with the public, going to people's houses with no weapons. I mean, with weapons, but with no lethal weapons, and by myself, with no partner, with no backup. And I'm gonna get the new statistics, but statistically, before the animal control officer's job is way more dangerous than an officer, because again, most officers are he or she are by themselves. Very few animal control officers are allowed to carry 9mm or any kind of handgun. It's typically just tasers, baton, and pepper spray. If that, some are only allowed to carry one or the other. And it's usually one officer to a whole family or two families. The reporting party, the victim, or the reporting party, the dog owner. Is just so many scenarios. But let's continue.
Careful that some of the pictures in this report are disturbing. When they moved in 2 years ago, Phil and Anna Henry hoped Petaluma would be a quiet place to retire. He's an architect. She's a university administrator. They wanted a place their grandchildren could visit and play with their shelter dog named Huck. He's a breed called Black Mouth Cur.
In the morning, he'd come up and get in our bed.
He wasn't allowed at nighttime. No, couldn't sleep. Never big enough bed.
The trouble began last summer when their neighbor complained that Huck barked every time he took out the trash.
And he looked over the fence at me and he said, well, if your dog ever comes over here again, he's not coming back.
There he is. Look at that guy. I could just tell by looking at his face, man. He's a jerk. You know what I mean? Straight up, my opinion. He's a jerk. But now I'm gonna speak to the dog owners. Man, barking dogs, barking at the neighbor. You don't want your dog barking at your neighbor. When you first get a dog or you got new neighbors, something like that, that makes sense. Takes a while, a couple days, couple weeks. Introduce the dog to your neighbor, make it friendly and pleasant, let them know it's not a threat. Otherwise, nobody wants to go, to walk on the side of their house and have the neighbor's dog constantly barking. It's just something you don't want. Could have easily been taken care of, but that's on the dog owner's responsibility, on the dog owners. And so that's one thing. But also, again, if this guy right here is the head of the de-escalation department, I would assume and think that he would have, initiated that or said, hey, neighbors, look. He's probably got tons of experience with that, with citizen on citizen complaints, with neighborly complaints. Come on, if he's an expert, if he's the main man in that city, why couldn't he take care of this at home where it matters the most? And now, but let me put on the dog owner. So if you're a dog owner, don't let your dogs bark at your neighbors. That's number one. That's not a good thing. Number two, having your dog run loose all the time. It's not a good idea. I've seen so many scenarios where the dogs are either killed and attacked by another loose dog. They're scared and run into the street and get ran over. They do what Huck did. They attack smaller animals or livestock that your neighbor owns, which, again, those things could be solved with buy him new chickens. Those things are replaceable. Now, Huck's not replaceable. It doesn't make sense. The punishment doesn't outweigh the minor violation. So again, though, it's the dog owners. They should have, number one, got some dog training, got the invisible fence. It doesn't say here how long they were, how long they had the dog. Obviously, some people were somewhat afraid of the dog, but if the dog was being handled by two senior citizens and had never bit anyone and was good around their kids, obviously he was just, a hyper dog and was being protective of his property. Some dogs bark and they're talking to you. That doesn't mean they're aggressive. But again, that's not for the people on the outside to know. If you're going to err on the side of safety, if a dog's barking at you, you're going to leave him alone. So again, as unfortunate as it is, the dog owners in this case open themselves up to this horrible situation, but I'm sure they never ever thought anything like this would happen. I would never think anything like this would happen, especially if I knew my neighbor was not only a police officer, but the master at the gun range, the head of the de-escalation department, and the commander of the SWAT team. Man, that if that doesn't sound like your perfect, law enforcement officer, I don't know. I don't know what else does, other than being, in the civilian world, they made this guy be like, pretty much sounds like he's the perfect officer. He can handle everything. He's got weapons. He's got the most crucial scenarios, SWAT, and then he's got the de-escalation. Let's watch some more, and then we'll continue. Like I said, I can keep.
That neighbor is head of the Novato Police SWAT team, master of the department's gun range. They're expert in de-escalation, Sergeant Nick Frey.
Nick, can I talk to you?
Frey did not stop to speak with me and did not return my messages, but his lawyer provided a surveillance video in which Frey recounts the conversation with Phil Henry about his dog. If I had to shoot him, I would. That recording comes from Sunday, September 18th, the day.
All right. Man, I didn't even think about this when I first watched this. But who talks like that, man? Who? I'll tell you who. A thug. A gangster. An insecure chump, man. This dude's a chump. And anybody that thinks like this dude in law enforcement is a chump. Straight up. I know there's a few good officers out there, deputies, that I know personally from the past that I work with. And trust me when I say most of what I say here does not apply to you gentlemen, and you know who you are. But to all the other ones that I've interacted with, that I've seen personally, myself, this is not hearsay, and what I've seen in articles, videos, and other things like this, man, there needs to be, the training needs to change, the hiring needs to change. There's so many aspects that can be improved, or not necessarily changed, improved. Let's say that. And also the accountability. I've had several situations, and if if it's in the cards, I might go get the video and post it up. Because I personally have a situation where I was definitely targeted. And anyway, that'll be for another topic, another video. But for now, like I said, this guy, it just blows my mind. He's supposed to be the best at handling the worst situations. You hear me? The best at handling the worst situations, and the first thing he does is pull his gun and shoot. What is that? Check, man, how many people has he shot on duty? How many people has he beat? How many people has he immediately went from 0 to 100?
Huck died. The Henry's 3 grandkids were visiting.
They were playing in the garden.
There was 3 little kids, man, under like 10 years old. 3. Okay, when he did this, keep that in mind. On top of these senior citizens, who do we protect in this world? I don't know about you, but I was taught that we protect our women and our children, and we keep them from seeing things like this.
And the dog, if they were right by the gate, the dog accidentally got out through the gate.
Huck headed straight for Sergeant Frey's yard. His 2 driveways have no fencing or gate. On Frey's security camera, you can hear the Henry's grandchildren trying to coax Huck home. Less than a minute later, Anna Henry arrives with Huck's leash. But the dog has already begun chasing chickens that roam loose in the yard. Anna Henry, 71 years old, dives at Huck and keeps going, killing one bird, appearing to wound another, as Sergeant Frey emerges from the house with a handgun at the ready. Anna is able to leash the dog. At the same time, Phil Henry's pulling up with the trunk open on his SUV. Huck would often jump right in, but there's not enough time.
I was right there. I immediately apologized profusely. Said, I'm so sorry. I will replace the chickens. And I got the dog on the leash, but I just had hip replacement surgery and I fell. And the dog went back to a flapping chicken that he hadn't killed yet.
The dog takes off toward the wounded chicken, pulling Anna to the ground. Sergeant Frey's wife shouts. The Henrys wish Frey had not used lethal force so quickly.
You could use a broom, you could use a hose of water. He had a lead on it, and if I had, probably 5 more minutes, I could have had him on the lead.
I said, why did you do that? He said, well, he went for me. I said, no, he didn't. He was running away from you, Nick.
I spoke with Nick Frey's attorney.
Why didn't he just grab the leash?
I think you're asking for a superhuman effort there.
Shut up. Oh my God. This lady right here, Allison Berry Wilkinson. She is retarded. I'm sorry. It's just the word. That's the truth. And see, and this is the problem too. Just because you're an attorney, you speak lies because you know that you can't say anything else. Instead of speaking the truth and what you really see, you say what is going to sound right in the court of law. Man, I'm speechless to what this lady's saying. It's just sad how money will make you say and do. Make you lie blatantly.
The dog viciously and ferociously lunged at him in a split second towards him.
Allison Berry Wilkinson tells me Frey gave his neighbors the chance to try and capture as well as control the dog. The attorney has worked with police practices expert Jeff Martin, who analyzed the video and claims it shows the dog charging Sergeant Frey.
If the dog is now moving towards you, is charging after you, after it's broken free from its owner, and after the dog is shot, falls pretty much at your feet, what's the logical inference to draw from that?
But the Henry family lawyer disputes that, pointing to the same video. Anna has Huck on the leash heading back home. He turns and takes off in this direction after another chicken. Sergeant Frey moves to the right out of the way, takes his shooting stance, opens fire. It appears the dog goes down here. Frey then takes 7 steps ending to the right of Huck. The Henry's attorney says that shows the dog was a significant distance from the sergeant and did not fall at Frey's feet when shot.
So it's pretty comical that he's now deciding to argue that he was acting in self-defense, because that's a little hard to do when the dog's running away from you.
With Huck bleeding on the ground and unable to move, Anna Henry and Frey's wife asks the sergeant to put the dog out of its misery.
Jenny, his wife, said, Nick, you have to help him. And I said, please, Nick, because I wanted the dog euthanized. And he said, I'm not touching that dog.
The dog is no longer a threat. He's not justified in just shooting a dog for the sake of shooting a dog.
Berry Wilkinson says he could not legally euthanize the dog, and that in any event, Frey thought the dog had died shortly after the shooting. The Henrys believed Huck was near death, so they waited with him in the rain. An hour later, he was still alive, so they loaded him into the SUV with their daughter.
And I climbed in the back with him because I didn't want him to die alone, like in the back of the car.
Does anybody see something missing here? Shoot. Red flags, alarms, sirens should be wailing and blaring right now. I do not see that there was a police report. Animal control. Okay. But where's the police? He discharged the firearm. There should have been a police investigation, which means there should have been a 911 call or a non-emergency call to the police. They don't say anything about that here. It sounds like they weren't called because they held on to Huck and didn't take him till an hour later. So that part is somewhat of a mystery here. But this just happened in Northern California. I'm gonna finish playing the video here. But this attorney that they got, man, she's something else. Just like them, liars.
Car.
She texted this picture to a friend who asked what was happening. Brianna Henry didn't know she had Huck's blood on her face. He later had to be euthanized. I tracked down the veterinarian who treated Huck that day, and she told me the bullets hit the dog from behind, in her opinion.
So there was one in the right back of his right shoulder, one right in the back, the top of the head.
Dr. Heather Burns shared Huck's x-rays with me showing the shrapnel. If a dog is lunging at you and you're firing at the dog, wounds are going to be
100%.
based at least in part on Sergeant Frey's statement that he felt threatened by the...
So, doesn't it sound like a lot of police shootings? No? I'm just keeping it real. Damn, I wonder if I could even be heard. Holy crap. He was shot in the back of the head and in the upper back. So that means he was probably going in the other direction. Doesn't seem like he was he would have had a dome shot. I mean, a shot right in the face, the chest, the arms, the shoulders, not in the back of the head. How does that make any sense at all? Back of the head. No, sir. Man, let's
dog and
Dog was no longer a threat. He's not justified in just shooting a dog for the sake of shooting a dog.
Barry Wilkinson says he could not legally
That's what he
euthanize
did.
the dog, and that in any event, Frey thought the dog had died shortly after the shooting. The Henrys believed Huck was near death, so they waited with him in the rain. An hour later, he was still alive, so they loaded him into the SUV with their daughter.
And I climbed in the back with him because I didn't want him to die alone, like in the back of the car.
She texted this picture to a friend who asked what was happening. Brianna Henry didn't know she had Huck's blood on her face. He later had to be euthanized. I tracked down the veterinarian who treated Huck that day, and she told me the bullets hit the dog from behind, in her opinion.
So there was one in the right back of his right shoulder, one right in the back, the top of the head.
Dr. Heather shared Huck's x-rays with me showing the shrapnel. If a dog is lunging at you and you're firing at the dog, wounds are going to be
100%.
based at least in part on Sergeant Frey's statement that he felt threatened by the dog and did what he felt necessary to protect himself. Sonoma County Animal Control closed the case, adding that state agricultural code allows a dog to be killed for chasing livestock or poultry. But this nationally recognized police use of force expert, who has testified in more than 1,300 cases, has a different opinion.
And I'm speaking at the level of a trained police officer. Can't shoot to protect chickens. End of story.
End of story. You cannot shoot to protect a chicken. Does that even make any sense? Does that make any sense to pull out your gun? Shoot it. You know, even in closed confined space. They're in a big area, big property. Man. End of story. You can't do it.
Roger Clark is surprised that the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and Novato Police, where Frey works, did not do their own investigations, relying instead on the animal control report. He questions why Frey would open fire toward an active roadway. A truck passes by just seconds after the last gunshot.
It was in the front yard. I don't know how the barrel was pointed, but if there was anywhere in the general vicinity of that car, it could ricochet and hit somebody in the car.
Finally, there's the issue of this skeleton the Frey family put up 1 week later near the spot where Huck died. The Henrys tell me it added to the pain and loss they already felt. Frey's attorney said it was just a Halloween decoration they had used before.
It was the same decoration they did last year. Was it thoughtless and unthinking?
This lady right here, man. Where do they get these people? Where are these people from? Who's saying how it handled people that
Yes, but was it intended to cause them emotional distress and harm? Absolutely not.
I'd like for him to feel some pain. I mean, I'll never forget that day ever. And I'd like him to be accountable. Somehow I would like account.
and we're gonna open it up. Nobody's watching on here. I don't even know if we're up on YouTube. Nobody's joining in. That's all right. So I'm gonna check something real quick. All right, here we go. We're back. I think I'm gonna stream this. I'm gonna go back up, but I'm gonna stream this to Facebook and let's see how we do over there. So we can get some discussions going. Stay tuned, follow. I'm gonna keep uploading content, discuss different things. We didn't have anybody jump on today yet and ask any questions. I think I covered most of what I wanted to say without going too long on too many different subjects. Tune in. Learn something about dogs. Learn something about life. Live better.